Introduction of the main characters, from what she admitted ended everything. In the quiet hum of a small cafe tucked into the heart of the city, Sarah and Ayan looked like any other couple in love. She, a soft-spoken artist with a gentle smile and eyes full of unspoken stories. He, a grounded, warm-hearted man with a calm demeanor and a deep love for books and morning walks. To outsiders, they seemed made for each other, two souls perfectly balanced, wrapped in a love that was both gentle and fierce. Sarah was the kind of woman who left pieces of herself in everything she touched. Her sketches, raw, expressive, and often tinged with emotion, hung on the walls of her modest apartment and were slowly gaining recognition at local art galleries. She had always been private, keeping her past locked away in layers of color and brush strokes. Ayan, on the other hand, was steady. He worked as a civil engineer, building not just roads and bridges, but stability in the lives of everyone around him, especially Sarah. Their story began in the most ordinary of ways, a chance meeting at a community art event. Ayan had been there reluctantly, dragged along by a friend, while Sarah was showcasing her latest pieces. Their first conversation had been brief, polite smiles and casual compliments, but there was something in the way Ayan listened, the way Sarah spoke, that hinted at a deeper connection. By their third encounter, it was obvious. Something real had begun. Over the next 2 years, their lives wove together like pages of the same book. Sunday mornings became sacred. Coffee, old jazz, and long walks where secrets were slowly exchanged. Ayan became Sarah's anchor, someone who didn't just admire her art, but understood the woman behind it. Sarah, in return, became his muse, his quiet inspiration after long days on dusty construction sites. Friends would often joke that they were the definition of relationship goals, but what no one saw, not even Ayan, were the hidden corners of Sarah's past she had never dared to open. It wasn't that she didn't love him. She did, completely. Maybe that's why she kept her secret buried. In a world that had once betrayed her, Ayan had become her safe place. She feared that if he ever knew the whole truth, that safety would crumble. But at this moment in the story, before the admission, before the unraveling, they were just two people in love. They laughed easily. They fought rarely. They dreamed of a shared future with a small garden, warm lights, and maybe even children. Their story was still whole, untouched. It was the calm before the storm, the soft breath before the scream, the final chapter before the truth would be spoken aloud, the truth that would change everything. Building the relationship, from what she admitted, ended everything. Their relationship grew quietly, like ivy creeping up an old wall, slow, steady, and deeply rooted. Sarah and Ayan were never loud about their love. There were no dramatic declarations, no flashy displays. Instead, it was built in the little moments, a hand reaching across the table, a shared look in a crowded room, the comfort of silence that didn't need to be filled. In the early days, their connection felt effortless. Conversations stretched into the night, touching on everything from childhood memories to fears about the future. Sarah had always been guarded, but with Ayan, her words came easier. He had a way of listening that made her feel seen, not just heard, but understood. And in return, she gave him her attention in a way no one else ever had. When he spoke, she wasn't waiting to reply. She was trying to understand who he really was. They began to share rituals, unspoken patterns that became the foundation of their bond. Every Friday night, they cooked together, often fumbling over recipes but laughing through the chaos. Sunday mornings were reserved for long drives with no destination, just music, open roads, and conversations about dreams they hadn't dared to speak aloud to anyone else. One evening, under a sky washed in sunset colors, Ayan told Sarah he wanted to build a home, not just a house, but a life filled with meaning. With you, he added quietly, as if saying it too loudly might break the moment. Sarah didn't respond with words. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes. That silence, for them, meant everything. They talked about the future as if it were a canvas they could paint together. She imagined a sunlit art studio. He imagined a garden with olive trees and lemon blossoms. They spoke of travel, of exploring old cities, and tasting new foods. And sometimes, after too much wine or on especially soft nights, they'd talk about kids, what kind of parents they'd be, what values they'd pass on, what fears they had. Through it all, trust grew like a quiet heartbeat between them. Sarah found herself opening up in ways she never had before. She told Ayan about her mother's death, the loneliness of her teenage years, and her struggle to believe she deserved happiness. Ayan listened without judgment, offering not solutions, but space. And when he shared stories of his own, the pressure of being the eldest son, the burden of expectations, she offered him that same space in return. They became each other's safe place, and with that safety came deep intimacy, not just physical, but emotional. They knew how to calm each other's storms, how to celebrate each other's victories, and how to sit quietly in the shadows when the days got hard. Their love was not perfect, but it was real, honest, built not on illusion, but intention. And still, in the corner of Sarah's mind, the truth waited, untouched, unspoken. Signs of something hidden, from what she admitted, ended everything. It didn't happen all at once. The changes were subtle, small ripples on the surface of an otherwise calm sea. At first, Ayan dismissed them as stress, perhaps an artist's mood swing or simple fatigue. But as the days passed, the inconsistencies grew harder to ignore. Sarah, once so open with her time and thoughts, started retreating into silence. She'd drift off during conversations, eyes fixed on nothing, only to snap back with a distracted smile and a rushed apology. "Sorry, I was just thinking about a piece I'm working on," she'd say. Ayan nodded, accepting it. After all, artists lived in their heads sometimes, didn't they? But then came the missed calls, the texts read and unanswered for hours. When he asked, she always had a reason. Meetings with gallery owners, last-minute errands, being caught in traffic. The excuses were plausible. Still, they didn't sit right. Not because they were unbelievable, but because they were too perfectly crafted. As if she had anticipated the questions before he asked them. The warmth between them remained, but it flickered now, like a candle in the wind. She still kissed him good morning, still laughed at his dry jokes, but something behind her eyes had shifted. There was a distance, barely noticeable but undeniably present, like a door slightly ajar with no explanation as to why. One evening, as they curled up on the couch watching a movie, Sarah suddenly got up to take a call. Her phone had buzzed quietly, and without looking at him, she stepped into the hallway. Ayan waited, pretending to watch the screen, but his attention was on the faint sound of her voice behind the wall, hushed, urgent, unfamiliar. When she returned, her smile was tight. "Just a gallery thing," she said, sitting beside him but keeping a slight space between their bodies. It was then that Ayan's unease turned into quiet suspicion. He began to notice other things. Her sketchbook, once left open on the coffee table, was now tucked away in a drawer. Her phone, once left face up and forgotten, was always with her, even when she went to the bathroom. She avoided certain questions now, brushing them off with a kiss or a joke. But her laughter no longer reached her eyes. Ayan didn't confront her, not yet. He told himself it could be nothing. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe she needed space. He didn't want to be the paranoid partner. He loved her, deeply, unquestionably. But love doesn't stop the mind from noticing patterns. And the pattern was becoming clear. She was hiding something. And though he couldn't name it yet, couldn't quite shape the shadow forming between them, he felt it, lingering, growing, waiting for the moment it would finally come into the light. The confrontation, from what she admitted, ended everything. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, the kind of night when everything should have felt normal. The dishes had been washed, the lights dimmed, and the soft hum of the ceiling fan filled the space between them. But Ayan couldn't pretend anymore. The weight in his chest had grown too heavy, and the questions that had haunted him for weeks refused to stay silent. Sarah sat cross-legged on the sofa, sketching aimlessly in her notebook. Ayan watched her for a long moment, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his mug. The glow of the table lamp cast warm shadows on her face, but there was something distant in her expression, even as she sat just feet away. "Sarah," he said gently, his voice cutting through the quiet. She looked up, startled, not because he spoke, but because of the tone. It wasn't casual. It was careful, intentional. "Yeah?" He exhaled slowly. "Can we talk?" She closed her notebook slowly and nodded, setting it aside. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He hesitated, searching her face for signs of readiness or resistance. "I've noticed you've been different lately." A flicker crossed her expression, but she quickly masked it with a soft smile. "Different how?" "You're distracted," he said. "You've been pulling away, not just once or twice, all the time. You used to tell me everything, even the smallest things. And now I feel like you're somewhere else, even when you're here with me." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes dropped to her hands, fingers tightening slightly in her lap. "I know you're busy," he continued, keeping his voice calm. "I know life gets complicated, but I feel like something's shifted, and I don't want to assume anything. I just want to understand. Are you okay? Is there something going on that I should know?" Sarah was silent, her breath shallow. The seconds stretched painfully between them. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't think you'd notice." That answer, simple as it was, made his stomach turn. "Of course I noticed," he said, leaning forward. "I see you. I've always seen you. That's what scares me." She looked up at him then, and for a moment he saw the conflict raging behind her eyes. Guilt, fear, sorrow, and something else. Resignation. "There's something I haven't told you," she said. Ayan's chest tightened. He nodded slowly. "Okay." "I didn't mean to lie," she continued, her voice trembling. I didn't know how to say it without losing everything." "Then say it," he said softly. "Whatever it is, just tell me." There it was, the invitation, the moment of truth hovering in the space between them. Sarah looked down again, as if gathering strength from the silence. She took a deep breath, preparing to unravel the words that would change both their lives forever. The confession, from what she admitted, ended everything. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the cushion, her knuckles pale against the fabric. For a moment, it seemed like she might change her mind, like the words would stay locked in her throat. But something in Ayan's eyes kept her grounded. He wasn't angry. He wasn't accusing. He was just waiting. Patient, steady, the way he always had been. "I never wanted to hurt you," she began, her voice barely audible. "You need to know that first." Ayan gave the faintest nod. "Okay." She inhaled sharply, as though preparing to rip a part of herself open. "Before I met you," she said, "there was someone else. Not just someone I dated. Someone who shaped everything that came after. I never told you because I wanted that part of my life to stay buried." She paused, searching his face, but he gave nothing away. "His name was Samir. I was with him for almost 2 years. It started out okay, like any relationship, but over time he became controlling, possessive, emotionally abusive. I lost who I was with him." She looked away, blinking back tears. "And I stayed even when I knew I shouldn't have." Ayan leaned forward slightly. "Sarah, you don't owe me an apology for your past. That's not—" "There's more," she interrupted, a sharp edge of panic in her voice. "That's not the part I'm hiding." A chill moved through the room. She gripped the cushion tighter. "One night, I finally walked away. I packed my things and left while he was out. I thought I was done with him, but he kept showing up, texting, threatening to ruin my reputation, expose personal things. And then one day, he stopped." Ayan's breath caught. Sarah continued, voice shaking. A few months before I met you, I found out he had died. He overdosed. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't even in touch with him anymore. But the guilt ate at me. Part of me felt responsible. Like if I had stayed, maybe he wouldn't have spiraled. She looked at Ayan again, eyes glassy with emotion. That's why I never told you. I was ashamed of that chapter of my life. Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid you'd think I was damaged. Ayan sat in stunned silence, the weight of her words pressing heavily between them. He could feel his own thoughts spiraling, not with judgment, but with disbelief. Not because she had a past, but because she had carried it alone for so long. Is that who's been calling? He finally asked. She nodded slowly. His brother. He found out we were together. He blamed me. He's been threatening to come forward, to tell lies about me, ruin everything I've built. And there it was, the full truth, raw and unfiltered. Ayan didn't speak. He couldn't. The air between them had shifted. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, final, and thick with consequence. The aftermath of the admission from what she admitted ended everything. Silence hung in the room like fog, thick, unmoving, impossible to see through. Ayan sat still, staring at the floor, the weight of Sarah's confession settling in his chest like a stone. Across from him, she waited, not expecting forgiveness, only bracing for the moment when everything would begin to fall apart. He had imagined all kinds of secrets in the weeks leading up to this moment. Another man, a lie about her past, even betrayal, but not this. Not a ghost from before their time together. Not a pain so buried that it had shaped everything she'd become. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. He wasn't sure what to say. He wasn't even sure what he felt. Say something, Sarah whispered. I'm trying to understand, he replied, eyes still distant. I'm trying to make sense of it. She nodded, her throat tightening. I know. He stood slowly and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out into the night. The city was quiet, unaware of the quiet collapse happening inside that room. In a way, it made it worse. The world kept moving while theirs stood still. You carried all of this alone? He asked finally, not turning to face her. Yes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was afraid it would change how you looked at me. A pause. Then, quietly, it has. The words hit her harder than she expected, not because they were cruel, they weren't, but because they were true. She had feared this moment, imagined it countless times, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. I'm not angry, Ayan said. I'm just shocked, hurt, maybe, that you didn't trust me with something so big. She swallowed hard. I did trust you, I still do. But I didn't trust myself to survive losing you if you couldn't handle it. He finally turned around, his face unreadable. And now? Sarah blinked, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. Now I've told you, and I know that might mean losing everything. The vulnerability in her voice was unbearable. Ayan looked at her and saw the woman he loved, the same woman who had made his life brighter, fuller. But he also saw something else now, a version of her shaped by pain he'd never known existed. He didn't know how to hold both truths at once. I need time, he said, voice low. To think, to feel this properly. Can you give me that? She nodded. Take all the time you need. He walked toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. I just need to know, was anything we had a lie? Her eyes met his. Number, everything with you was real. This was just the part I was too broken to share. And then he was gone, leaving her in a room where truth had finally been spoken, but love now hung in uncertainty. Emotional fallout from what she admitted ended everything. The days that followed were hollow. Time stretched unnaturally, filled with silences that said more than words ever could. Sarah and Ayan drifted into separate orbits, each carrying the weight of the confession in their own way. Sarah stayed home, barely touching her art supplies. Her once vibrant studio became a still, gray space where canvases stared back at her blankly. The weight of her secret no longer lived in her alone, but that didn't make it easier. In fact, now that it was out in the open, the guilt festered louder. Her fear wasn't just about Ayan walking away. It was the knowledge that she had created a fracture where there had once been trust. She played their conversations on loop in her head. Every laugh, every late-night promise, every moment when she could have told him the truth, but chose silence instead. She tried to write him a letter, then another. But every word felt like another excuse. So she sat with her regret, waiting, hoping that time would soften the jagged edges of what she'd done. Ayan, meanwhile, buried himself in routine. Work became his refuge, a place where blueprints were predictable and deadlines made sense. But even there, her voice lingered. Her name rested at the back of his throat every time someone asked, "You okay?" He wasn't, but he didn't know how to answer the question without unraveling. At night, he walked. Miles through empty streets, headphones in, the music too quiet to distract him. His thoughts were loud. He thought about how much he loved her, still loved her, and how that love now sat in conflict with the ache of betrayal. He didn't blame her for her past. What hurt wasn't the story she had lived through. It was the wall she had built to keep it from him. He tried to imagine being in her shoes, the fear, the shame, the survival. And part of him understood, deeply. But understanding didn't dissolve the hurt. It only added more layers to it. They didn't speak for 5 days. No messages, no calls, just silence stretching longer and wider between them. On the 6th night, Sarah stood outside his apartment, holding a sketchbook against her chest. She didn't knock. She didn't press the buzzer. She just stood there, hoping the universe would somehow pull him to the window. He didn't appear. Inside, Ayan sat in darkness, fully aware she was there. His heart pounded at the sound of her footsteps, but he couldn't bring himself to open the door. He wasn't ready. Not yet. 2 people, still in love, both aching. But now separated not by miles, just pain. Pain that neither of them knew how to heal. And as night wrapped around the city, both of them whispered the same thought in different places. What now? Decision time, from what she admitted, ended. Everything. Ayan couldn't remember the last time he had truly slept. His nights were filled with restless thoughts, fragments of Sarah's confession that tore through him with a vicious clarity. The weight of what she had revealed kept him awake, pulling at the edges of his resolve, until he couldn't breathe beneath the pressure of it. His mind oscillated between 2 choices: forgive her or walk away. But each seemed like a leap into the unknown. The pain in his chest was physical. The image of Sarah standing outside his door, so vulnerable and full of regret, replayed over and over. He had thought that love, real love, was unconditional. But this was different. This wasn't just about an argument or a mistake. This was a lie. A hidden life she had chosen to keep from him. Could he still love her after that? Could he trust her again? His mind wandered back to the moments that had once felt perfect, their spontaneous trips, their late-night talks, the way they had fit so effortlessly together. How could that be real if she had kept this secret so deeply buried? But the truth was, he didn't have all the pieces. He didn't know what it was like to be trapped in a past that had once defined you. She had been so young, so vulnerable when she met Samir. He wasn't sure if she had even known how much of her life had been taken by him until it was too late. She had fought to rebuild herself, and he was a part of that. The person she was with him was someone she had become after the wreckage. But had she truly healed? It wasn't just her past that held him back. It was his own fear. Fear of being vulnerable again, of trusting someone completely and being hurt. But wasn't that the nature of love? The risk of giving yourself fully to another person, knowing you might get hurt. He had trusted her with so much of his heart already. But could he trust her with his future? Ayan paced the room, his fingers tugging at his hair, trying to wrestle the decision from the confines of his mind. He wasn't used to indecision. He was the kind of man who made choices, clear, rational ones. But this was too tangled. The stakes were too high. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. She hadn't texted him in days, not after their last conversation. He stared at the words on the screen. "I'm sorry, I know I hurt you, and I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I will wait. I'll wait as long as you need." She had already given him all the space he had asked for, but now the decision was in his hands. He could walk away, let the wound fester and drift apart, never knowing what could have been. Or he could choose to forgive, to confront the past, no matter how painful, and move forward together. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. It felt like time itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to decide. Ayan dropped his phone onto the coffee table and walked to the window. Outside, the world continued on, unaware of the storm raging in his heart. He closed his eyes and exhaled. It was time to make a choice. Separation and silence, from what she admitted, ended everything. The decision had been made, and yet the silence that followed felt like a betrayal of its own. Ayan didn't know when the door between them had closed, but it was undeniably shut now, leaving them both standing on opposite sides, unable to reach one another. He had gone to her that night, finally. He had stood at her doorstep, his heart a mess of love and hurt, ready to offer her a chance to rebuild, a chance to try again. But when he looked into her eyes, he realized he wasn't sure how to begin. He had forgiven her, yes. But could he truly forget the weight of the secret, the lies built around a past that had left her too broken to share? He hadn't said much. He hadn't needed to. The decision had already been made between them, written in the unspoken space that had settled like dust. Ayan had kissed her forehead, briefly, tenderly, the way he had always done, but this time it was final. He had walked away. The next few days were a blur of scattered thoughts and loneliness. Neither of them reached out, though they both wanted to. Every passing moment without her felt heavier than the last. Ayan went back to his work, to the routine that had numbed him before, but this time it didn't feel like enough. His apartment felt colder, emptier. Her absence echoed in every corner. Sarah tried to keep herself busy too, but each time she reached for her sketchbook or tried to focus on a new piece, she found herself lost in memories. Memories of him, of their conversations, of their laughter. Every brushstroke felt like an attempt to fill the void, but the canvas remained empty. The space where he had once been, so present and warm, had grown unbearably still. Neither of them spoke the words that needed to be spoken, words of finality. There was no grand fight, no angry confrontation. They didn't need to argue. The truth was simple and cruel. The love they had shared could no longer bridge the gap of the past she had hidden from him. In the days that followed, Sarah found herself standing by the window, staring out at the world that seemed to carry on without a care. She thought of calling him, but she didn't. She thought of sending a message, something that might bring them back together. A plea, an apology, anything. But she didn't. Part of her knew there was no coming back from this. For Ayan, the silence was equally deafening. He couldn't escape the feeling that something important had slipped through his fingers, and no amount of work or distraction would change the truth. He had chosen to walk away from the woman he had loved. What they had was real. But sometimes, real love wasn't enough. Sometimes, the ghosts of the past were too powerful, too painful to overcome, and so they stayed in their silence, a silence that was more final than any word could ever be. Both of them, in their own way, carrying the weight of what they had lost and what they could never have again. Reflection and closure, from what she admitted, ended everything. Weeks passed since that final moment between them. Time didn't heal the wound, but it made it more bearable. Both Ayan and Sarah had settled into a new rhythm of life, one that didn't involve the other. But the silence that stretched between them was not just a barrier. It was a constant reminder of what they had lost. Ayan sat by the window one evening, looking out at the city that never seemed to stop moving, even as he remained still. He had kept himself busy, finding solace in the predictability of his daily routine. But it wasn't the work or the distractions that filled the void inside him. It was the memories of her, fleeting glimpses of their time together that would never be more than memories now. He had always believed that love was a force capable of overcoming any obstacle. He had been so sure that with enough trust, two people could weather anything. But now, staring at the city lights in the distance, he realized that trust wasn't just a foundation built on promises. It was something deeper, something more fragile. And love, as it turned out, wasn't immune to the truths we hide, even when we think they are buried forever. He thought of Sarah, of the woman he had loved so fiercely. She had carried so much pain with her, but he never saw it until it was too late. The truth had been a weight, and even though he had tried to forgive, he knew there were some things that could never be erased. And then there was the question that lingered. Had he made the right choice? Walking away had been the hardest thing he had ever done, but part of him believed that truth, no matter how painful, always held a higher value than love built on lies. The hurt that came from that truth was undeniable, but in the end, he couldn't ignore the fact that the love they had was built on something unsteady. If he had stayed, would he have ever fully trusted her again? Could they have rebuilt something real, or would they have simply been two people haunted by the shadows of the past? Meanwhile, Sarah sat in her studio, the glow of the desk lamp illuminating the papers spread out before her. Her brushes lay still on the table, untouched. She hadn't painted in days, but now the emptiness inside her had become too loud to ignore. She thought about the decision she had made, to hide her past, to keep the truth from him in order to protect him from the pain. In the end, though, it was the truth that had cost her everything. There had been a time when she thought the past could be buried, that the scars could remain hidden and unnoticed. But as she reflected on everything she had lost, she realized how deeply the lie had shaped them both. In trying to protect Ayan, she had only placed a wall between them. Love, she had come to understand, could survive many things, but trust was fragile, and truth, no matter how hard it was to face, would always find its way to the surface. As she sat in the quiet of the room, Sarah felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. It wasn't peace exactly, but acceptance. She had made choices, and those choices had led to this. What had been lost would never be regained, but maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go and find peace within herself. Ayan, too, had found his own kind of closure. He didn't know what the future held, or if he would ever love like that again. But he knew one thing: truth had a cost, and sometimes it was worth paying, even if it meant saying goodbye.